to introduce the next inductee, is Cornell NPS 85, PhD 92.
And parent 14. Mackenzie would have been very mad if she hadn't been recognized. So, it is a truism that very few hoteliers between 1961 and 2003 were not professionally touched by the many personas of Professor Robert M. Chase. Whether it was back in the day at the New York Hilton when Engineer Chase had to rush with a tray of punch cards to IBM headquarters to run an early iteration of Chase for senior managers, or being one of 1,000 students in Greg Norcus's freshman HF 100 in the 80s and 90s when Chase and Crace were practiced there. Everything made an impact on anyone who had ever played the game. From teaching basic financial management skills to Native American teenagers for the Indian Management Association, or to early regional franchisees for KFC in China, Bob has reached every corner of the globe. His motto, learning can be fun, in the form of a hand-lettered sign hung in calligrapher Chase's office for many years, and then was given to me in 1999, and has been hanging on the wall behind me ever since. But let me tell you something you may not know about Teacher Chase. Teaching with Bob is like teaching or playing improv jazz with a living legend. His foundation of classical theory allows him to create soaring riffs of spontaneous brilliance. The openness of yes and that he calls discovery learning is mirrored by his unique discovery teaching style. In fact, Genius Chase may have also invented what we now affectionately call teachertainment. He ended every job we did together by saying, "That was good theater." And it was. But this freewheeling comes with a risk, because you never want to hear him say, "Whoopsie, never seen that before." So after a few years, Norcus and I finally figured out that to keep from getting bored, Programmer Chase was breaking the Fortran code on purpose because it was fun for him to debug. Basically, for decades, every job was a beta test. Eventually, all of Bob's teaching partners figured out that to work with Bob, you needed to have your own shtick, including at least a dozen targeted lessons in your pocket and a flexible inventory of war stories to tell. Then in 1992, the Crace program really hit the big time. The new CEO for Long John Silver's, Clint Clark, heard about the simulation from his HR director, who had played Chase back at the Holiday Inn University. You see a thread here. It is hard to believe, but at the time, Long John Silver's was the fastest growing, most profitable restaurant chain in the entire country, with 1,000 company-owned units and another 300 franchised. After a number of successful regular jobs for senior executives at LJS headquarters in Lexington, we were asked to take the show to Orlando in September 1992. Visionary Chase, with Greg Norcus, Mike Novus, and 6 hotel students and me, set up a massive operation at the former Wyndham SeaWorld Hotel so that 1,300 restaurant managers could play Crace in 2 groups of 600 plus each. Over 8 days, they filled the largest ballroom in Orlando, set up as a massive theater in the round. There were about 200 competing teams, all watching a real-time stock ticker scroll through the giant ballroom, showing winners and losers. As they played the game, somehow, nothing broke. Let's watch Bob doing that show in one of his best performances ever. Could you please roll that short video?
Now, to foster learning and understanding, we used a simulation exercise which has been successfully used to train people in the restaurant and hotel industry since 1969. This is called the Cornell Restaurant Administration Simulation Exercise, or CRAZE.
My name is Bob Chase. I'm affiliated with, or have been affiliated with Cornell University, I think, for 30 years. I started when I was 10. but I guess I am the senior member of the faculty. How many of you have heard of Sesame Street? I think Sesame Street's probably better known than Cornell University. So what we're going to do today is we're going to pretend that we're all going back to Sesame Street, and Sesame Street's job today is to run a restaurant. And let's see, Sesame Street is always brought to you by a number, isn't that right? So the number for today, you got this little card right here? Okay. I want you to write down the number 3, because today Sesame Street is going to be brought to you by the number 3. Let's see, we got to come up with 3 things. The first of the 3 key players is going to be the guest, so just write down the word guest if you would. The next key player he mentioned, of course, was management, or the manager. So the second of the 3 key players is going to be the management. And he didn't mention at great length the other key player, but the other key player in any line of business, of course, is going to be the person who brings their monetary resources to the opening party of your little restaurant. And that's the person, I suppose we could just refer him to the owner, the person who's going to bring the capital that's necessary to run your little restaurant. So Sesame Street's going to be brought to you today by 3 key players: the guest, the manager, and the owner. As a teacher, one of your jobs, and as you are as managers, you're always teachers, is to find out a little bit about your audience. So I want you to write down underneath those 3 key players the width of the counter at Long John Silver's, the serving counter. For our theme in Sesame Street, we got these 3 key people, and they all come together at the width of the counter. So our theme for today is going to be managing the last 3 feet. I'm going to assume 3 feet because a lot of you said 36 inches. And that's your job as a manager. By the way, who supplied the counter? That's generally the job of the capital, people who bring money to the party, and that's converted into a counter width. The management team is on one side of the counter. Who's on the other side of the counter? The guest, okay? So your job and our little task is going to be measuring and managing the last 3 feet in your little restaurant.
So here's why this is amazing. Many of the Long John Silver's restaurant managers, the 1,300 that were in that program, had not graduated from high school. They were promoted because they were good fish cutters. Yet by the end of the following fiscal year, CEO Clark credited Crace with directly adding 4% to system-wide operating cash flow, well over $3 million in 1993. That, by any measure, is impact. Finally, on a personal note, Mentor Chase was the main financial support for my young family while I was a very junior faculty member at the hotel school. For a number of years, Crace paid me more than my annual lecturer salary. My adult children still know him as Uncle Bob, and I remain forever grateful. Now, now to accept the award and representing Bob, his beloved late wife Faith, and his daughter Ken, please welcome Bob's son, Benton Chase, to the stage.
Yes, the 3 of us, you want to grab that sign too?
Oh, sure. That would be great.
One, two, three. Thank you.
So before I start, I was approached by a student of the class of '97 who came up to me and said, "Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for what you taught me and my classmates, can we get a picture? And I graciously said yes. So he took the picture because I, like Prof. Chase and Benjamin Buttons, do in fact age backwards. So I'd like to think that what my father has done is immortalized like Benjamin Buttons, maybe like the Highlander, through many of you in the room and his thousands of students out there in the world. Going back to 1961, Bob Beck was the new dean of the hotel school. And Bob Chase was his first hire fresh from the submarine base in Groton, Connecticut. In 1964, my father was introduced to computers by a little-known company called IBM in Endicott, New York. He raced back to the dean and said, "This is the future, this is the future." And Dean Beck said, "Forget it, I'll have none of it." Fortunately, my dad persisted, and we fast forward to 1980, and the dean stated, and I quote, "Bob Chase had put us ahead of everyone except the engineers. He was a genius." My father's software, Chase, the Cornell Hotel Administration Simulation Exercise, would forever entwine his name with the Cornell Nolan Hotel School. His teaching impacted thousands of hotel school graduates across generations, and according to him, his work took him to 38 countries, spreading Cornell's name and the passion for discovery learning. I traveled with him to run the game in at least 6 of those places, including as far away places as Oman, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait. Chris Muller recently shared that he last presented to CRACE in 2019, marking a 50-year lifespan for a software that he invented in 1969. Simply unbelievable. How many software applications throughout the world have survived 50 years? Last I checked, Microsoft Windows turned right 38. If you saw the movie Big Fish, you'll remember it's about a charismatic storyteller with a flair for grand, exaggerated tales. In the film, the son tries to separate fact from fiction. His stories paralleled my life with my dad, Professor Robert Chase. My father was surrounded by larger-than-life tales. One article in the Cornell Hotel Society magazine claimed that he was, and I quote, "the first person outside of England to teach computing at a university." Another of his stories that he loved telling was that he was the second Cornellian ever to visit Gambia, Ethiopia. The first Cornellian had disappeared after going for a swim in the hippo pools, and they found nothing but his floating rubber sneakers. And then there were a few of his other favorite stories, including the New York bankers that were tricked into buying 100,000 gallons of salad oil, a tank filled with just 3 inches of oil and 30 feet of salt water. His constant reference to his BFF, best friend forever, Tommy Watson, the founder of IBM, who passed away in 1956. Punch cards. Winning sailboat races by starting on port tack. Who would ever think to do this? His mentor, Arthur Nielsen's constant reminder that 2 plus 2 does not, in fact, equal 4 at present value. And speaking of present value, there was his in-class calculation of the value of the San Francisco quarterback Steve Young's $40 million contract awarded in 1984, which deferred payments extending through 2027. You just can't make this stuff up. But over time, I stopped fact-checking his stories, stopped searching for stamps on his passport, and embraced the magic that was Robert Chase, educator, calligrapher, journeyman, and performer extraordinary, Chris. He still insists he's not a computer god. I'm an educator who uses computers, he'd say. He believed in and taught us all the time value of money, the income statement, and the last 3 feet. Thank you, Dad, for sharing your magic and insight. I'm honored to accept this nomination for you into the Cornell Hotel Society Hall of Fame, joining Dean Howard Meek as only the 2nd person inducted who is a non-hoteler. Well-deserved and well-played. Thank you for your passion, leadership, inspiration, and enriching so many lives, mine included. With love from your son and the many others whose lives you've touched, including leaders in this room and beyond across the hotel and restaurant industry worldwide.